Hello, and welcome to the Farmhouse Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin, from The Farmhouse. We're a small-scale farm operation in the outskirts of Brooklyn, Wisconsin, interested in veggies, flowers, livestock, and honestly, whatever it is our family ventures into next. It's a learn from experiences kind of journey that we're on, and one that many other similar farm operations are on too. This podcast will bring you closer to South Central Wisconsin's small-scale farmers, as well as share some valuable stuff happening right here in our area. Let's talk a little bit about your small-scale operation, what you're into, and how it works for you. Happy you're joining us for this episode of the Farmhouse Podcast. All right, what's up? Here we go. On a gorgeous Saturday afternoon in May, I visited Yellow Dog Flowers and Produce. Yellow Dog is owned and operated by Molly Stentz with assistance from John Peck. As Molly walked me around the farm, John was busy prepping the property for a Memorial Day farm gathering to welcome friends, family, and neighbors out to their new place. Yellow Dog originated on some leased land in Edgerton, and just less than a year ago, Molly and John acquired the current farm in Brooklyn. So they have been busy starting up production on the new site while transitioning off their old site. Focused on both flowers and veggies, the variety of plants growing at Yellow Dog is beautiful. Tomato plants growing in rows just a pathway across from a row of echinacea. It's a wonderful mix of plants all happily commingling. Molly is a strong believer in native plants and pollinators to help the small ecosystem flourish that Yellow Dog is cultivating right on the farm. As the birds chirped in the background, I had the privilege to sit down with Molly and chat about her journey as well as what she's got going on at Yellow Dog Flowers and Produce. As per usual, I have shared a few links to some of the things that Molly mentions throughout the podcast, which are posted on the Farmhouse website podcast page. Let's jump right into episode 4. Welcome, Molly, and thanks for being a guest on the Farmhouse Podcast and having me out to your farm today. It's a beautiful Saturday this spring, so I appreciate your time and spending a little bit with us. To start, can you just give a brief overview of your farm, just the location, size, some structures or buildings here, and kind of what you have growing?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So we're here on Highway 92 in Brooklyn. At Yellow Dog Flowers and Produce. We've got a 20-acre diversified farm. We grow cut flowers and vegetables organically, and we've got 3 little sheep and a flock of chickens and a bunch of old sheds here on the property. We put in a few fruit trees. We just planted the berry patch yesterday. So we got a lot going on.
Cool. And it's just you and John on the farm doing the work?
Yeah. John and I, and then we have one employee that comes on Fridays.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
This is our first year. The first year having employees, it was a really big deal.
Sure. Can you talk just a little bit about that journey and kind of share how you ended up here on this farm, and just kind of how you ended up doing what you're doing, so you can go back as far as you want to get us to where we are here today?
Yeah. So how far back to go? I mean, my mom taught me a lot about growing things, so I owe a lot to her. I worked years ago, I ran a grocery co-op, and that was probably my first entree. I mean, I guess it started out as a teenager. I was a vegetarian and nobody in my family was. And so they're like, great, have fun cooking. So I had to learn to cook, which I loved. And that kind of led me to learning about produce and vegetables. And then I ended up, I lived in central Illinois and I ran a grocery co-op, and we purchased a lot from local vendors. And one of the farmers that we bought from was like, hey, would you ever want to work for me? And I was like, sure. So I helped him set up on his market stand, and I actually found him a woman that became his farm manager, and kind of unlocked my love for farming then. It's called Blue Moon Community Farm, and it was not the Blue Moon here, not in Stoughton, but in Illinois. So yeah, fast forward, I moved here to Madison, and I started working for a farm called Westar Farm, which has gone through many evolutions. It was at one point market farm. It sold to Homegrown Organics, if you remember them. They were like a distributor in Madison that pooled a bunch of produce and did runs down to Chicago. Then we were a CSA farm for a little bit, and then they eventually turned into basically a nursery business.
Yeah, it's in Cottage Grove, right?
Yeah, and they sell to Willie Street Co-op and a bunch of garden stores around town. You maybe have seen their little plant starts. So yeah, I have worked for them for probably like 10 years. I also worked for Steve Pincus and Beth Kazmar at TP.
Cool.
And
they've got a cool big operation now.
Yeah, I got to see a range of operations. And friends of mine own a farm up in Sauk County called Hilltop Community Farm. Rob and Aaron, and they were a big influence on me too. So yeah, it's been something I have been doing for a while, but you can't really buy a farm off of a farm worker wage. And I found that out pretty quickly.
Sure.
But I remember Steve and Beth saying like, what are you doing? It's like, you want your own farm? I'm like, yeah. And I was like, okay, I probably have to get a different job. So I have always done farming, but always done other things as well. So I have kind of another career in media, and have worked for different media companies for the past 20 years.
Gotcha.
So
just like full-time jobs along with?
Yeah. I mean, it's ebbed and flowed.
Sure.
Yeah, I've had a lot of random jobs. I was a landscaper at one point, drove dump trucks. I've done a lot of different things. But I've always done things that are related to food and plants. And then the journalism and media work kind of was more regular and paid bills. So
gotcha.
What's nice now is that I can work from home, except the internet here is terrible, but that's another story. But I can work from home, which has been my goal and dream for the past 20 years. That has finally come true this year.
Awesome.
Because before it was always renting land, and then you get moved around, and then obviously it's hard to get infrastructure, and plus just the driving, and then you get there and realize you left your tools on your front porch, and etc.
Sure. And so you bought this, you said, a little less than a year ago.
Yes.
Can you talk about, you just mentioned the leased, so your kind of experience with the Silverwood Park, kind of leasing land and that whole
so
stretch.
Dane County has a park that not many people know about. It's called Silverwood, and it's in Edgerton. It's like in the very bottom corner of the county, and so it's probably the furthest park away from Madison. So it's kind of the most neglected, I would say, left to its own devices. But the cool thing is it was donated to the county by a former county board member and farmer with the stipulation that it has to remain an ag. So it can't be developed. They can't flip it. They can't, pave it. It has to stay an ag. And so basically there's a friends group of these amazing dedicated volunteers, many of whom live right around there, that came together and basically run it. They basically run this land, and they rent out acreage to anyone who wants. It's not a lot of infrastructure there, but it's affordable, and it's a nice place. A lot of thistles. Don't miss that. So that really let us get our start, because it's like I've always gardened anywhere I lived, and like even when I was in a little apartment, filled up my every inch of spot, like space I could. And then when I moved to a house, filled that up, got a community garden plot, filled that up,
Mm-hmm.
then rented land and filled that up. Um, so that was really what enabled us to start the business. Because before I was just working for other people, which was awesome, but I knew I always wanted to do my own thing. So
you started Yellow Dog on the leased land
yeah,
down in Edgerton.
yep.
And so production and operation kind of happen. They have like infrastructure in terms of like wash pack shed and equipment and stuff, or
They have
did
a
you have
cool
to
bot.
haul your stuff?
They have a
Oh,
cool
they have a
bot,
cooler.
which was good. But yeah, that was about it. We finally put in irrigation last year, which was a whole process. Because the county got the land donated, but they didn't get any like operating funds, and
Mm-hmm.
so the land was there, but the county's not really putting any money into
Right.
it, and so it was like, okay, anything that anybody wants for the park, people have to like basically make it happen themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're always doing fundraisers, and so I think one of the board members wrote a grant
Yeah.
that enabled them to purchase the irrigation, which was huge.
Mm-hmm.
Because before we were like driving to the lake nearby or like hauling buckets in our pickup truck, and that was kind of a mess.
I can't imagine. I mean, there benefits, would you say? I guess the one big benefit would be just like financially versus owning.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
mean it was what enabled us to get our start, because I
Sure.
mean they rent for 200 an acre.
Mm-hmm.
I mean we looked for land for a long time, and I never thought I could afford it.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of the farm sizes are big, right? 40 acres, 100 acres. I was like, I can't, I can't
Mm-hmm.
do that. John is a, college professor, works at Madison College, and um, yeah, it just was not going to happen. So um, we thought, okay, a lot of people have like little homesteads. Could we just get like,
3
two,
acres.
3 acres, something like that, and make do? But a lot of those are kind of vulnerable to development pressure. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're close to a subdivision, or, just who knows what could move
Sure.
in. So that just felt vulnerable and not really enough space. So yeah, I mean, I've been looking for years and just thought we knew we kind of had to still be in the radius of Dane County because both of our jobs were there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Prices are expensive.
yeah, so we just really lucked out on this place, finding something that was um, not in like chemical production
Mm-hmm.
too. So it was basically in hay, which was perfect.
You mentioned the jobs that you both have outside of the full-time kind of farm
Yeah.
operations. I'm just curious to hear how you balance those two and what that looks like on a weekly or monthly basis.
Yeah, balance is a good word. Um, so John works as a professor at Madison College, and he works part time. He also works for a nonprofit called Family Farm Defenders. That's also part time. I have a full time job, um, but I've always had some flexibility in my schedule, and now I'm working from home, which is nice. So basically, John does a lot of the labor during the week. Like I do nights and weekends, and I do most of the planning, administrative, website, marketing, sales, accounting, um, and then I grow all the nursery plants, like all of our seedlings and starts. I do the seed schedule, um, and I kind of do the planning and the layout. Um, and then John does like the labor, the hard part. And then this year we have an employee, which is amazing. Because previously I worked for WPR, which was nice because they give you like 5 weeks of vacation. Plus we had all these furloughs we had to take. So it was like I had a lot of time when I worked for the state. So I don't have that anymore. So yeah, it's nights and weekends. And we've kind of structured the business such that we do like our CSA pack on Friday, and then we do our delivery on Saturday. So I do the delivery on Saturday, and then I do market on Sunday. So
structured to kind of fit your schedule.
yeah. I mean,
Makes
we
sense.
could do more, but I guess my principle going into the farm has been to not take on a lot of debt other than a mortgage. So I've always just kind of grown it slowly as I could, each year, whatever we make, plowing it back into, the next year. Like, the first few years we didn't even have that delivery van, it's just like my pickup truck, and we just put it all and did the markets. Farmers market is an accessible, good place to start, and the Northside market has been amazing. They're awesome. So that's how we got our start. And then it was really the pandemic that when we weren't sure we were going to have markets at all, that we were like, shoot, we should just deliver. We should just deliver, and people can buy online, and it's, don't have to see them, don't have to interact. Sure. It'll be safe. And so that's really where the CSA delivery was born. And
yeah, and that was one of my other kind of questions or topics here, to talk a little bit about your offerings with the CSAs, and the structure that you have. It makes total sense. And then you do the market on Sundays too, and then you also have this weddings and events kind of area too. So I'm just kind of curious, all of the offerings, and how that functions.
I do kind of a select number of weddings, a very small number. I know there's a lot of demand, but they're a huge amount of work, and I kind of feel like you get hired to just absorb the stress of the event. Sure. And there's only so much of that I can take with everything else I got going on. So I do a few a year, and they're generally for people that really like and want what we offer, which is, native plants, perennials, everything homegrown, everything grown on the farm. I don't buy in anything. So that means like you can't have peonies in October. I'm sorry, it means depending on your wedding date is going to dictate what flowers are available, and you have to want that. You have to want them to be local.
A niche kind of person that would.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you meet amazing, cool people, and it's been awesome. I mean, and it's a creative side of me too, get to build wedding arches and, bridal bouquets is really fun. Like once you actually get to it, but it's just like the months and months of planning, like and negotiation, and like redoing the bids, and then things changing, and, dealing with all the ups and downs, and then the weather. And, it's like once you actually get to the day where you get to design it, that's the good part,
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So what would you say, I guess, if you percentage them out, like how much is your operation CSA based? How much is it market based? And how much would it be weddings, events?
Yeah, I would say, weddings are probably like 10% or less. CSA is probably like 50 and market's 40, something like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then I think you have quite a few flower offerings.
Yeah.
I think somewhere it says 50 plus. I'm just curious how you kind of, I mean, there are millions of different seeds to buy when you're ordering. How do you target specific varieties? And is that 50-ish number kind of your target, or does that just happen to end up where you ended up?
Yeah, that's an at least. I mean, so running a flower farm and trying to make sure that you have flowers fresh and available every week from June through October, and then we do tulips and daffodils and stuff in May, is a trick. I mean, you have to have a lot of different variety, and you have to constantly be planting. So, and plus I just love them. So, um, I have been investing in perennials and trying to bulk up my perennial selection. A lot of those are still in Edgerton that I need to move. Um, yeah, so it's kind of a mix, right? So I have like straw flowers and status that are good for drying so that I can kind of make sure that I always have things in October, depending on whether when the frost hits. Um, and then dahlias and Lysianthus and Cosmos and Rebecca. I don't know. I just
Are you
love them.
succession planting at
Oh
all?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So make sure.
constantly. We're constantly, so I probably start our first seedlings in February, and then in a greenhouse and then just go until July.
So I mean that you said was part of kind of your role on the farm is to plan all of those kind of
Yeah.
successions out. Um,
Yeah. Because you have to, I mean, it's a real like orchestra because you have to know, all right, the growing conditions, the color palette, and to make sure that you have the focal flowers, the foliage, the accents, like in all of a complementary color palette that's going to all bloom at the same week so that you've got a bouquet. And then you have to do that every week of the season.
mm-hmm.
It's, it's a puzzle. It's a challenge. Maybe that's why I like it. It's
Sure.
hard, but plus you just get this incredible variety. I think I'd be bored if it was just like, well,
Sunflowers every.
yeah. I mean, I think about that. I think about, wow, people that do peony farms, like that must be a really intense month. And then what do you do the rest? Like, I mean, obviously there's a lot of work, but
Uh-huh.
I think I couldn't do that where I just did one crop.
Sure. The fillers or the foliage that you mentioned, are those primarily perennials, or do you grow things just as kind of the background for your arrangements?
Yeah. So yeah, I love nine bark as a perennial. I use a lot of that. Also like the annual stuff, Amy, I love that. Blue Plurum um, is another good one. Yarrow, use a lot to fill out bouquets. Feverfew, um, yeah. And then I just planted a bunch of thornless blackberries, and that I am hopeful I can use the foliage for that
Cool.
too. Um, yeah, so it's a mix. It's a mix because they all kind of come at different times, and that's just the trick is
Sure.
always making sure. I've used mint, I've used a lot of herbs
Oh yeah.
in bouquets too, which also makes it smell really good. Which that's one thing people tell me too, that not only do you not have to worry that there's no chemicals, pesticide residue, any of that, like it just smells good,
Right.
right? Because they're grown, they're fresh, and they're meant to be in your house.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can essentially make an herb bouquet, right?
Yeah,
Maybe that's one week.
basil, rosemary,
Uh-huh.
mint, yarrow, hyssop. I mean,
That's a bouquet right there.
mountain mint. I love mountain mint in bouquets.
Yeah. Cool. You mentioned a little bit the seed starting. I'm just curious to hear that kind of. Do you start everything from seed, or are you purchasing plugs too for some stuff? And
So mostly from seed. The one exception is Lysianthus because I'm just not that good. I
pretty
mean,
pretty hard to start from seed.
you have to start in January because they're so beautiful. Everybody loves them. I mean, it's like the number one wedding flower, but they take forever. Like my friends at Westar basically let me put my seedlings in their nursery, in their greenhouse, which is amazing because they turn it on, and they're in commercial production. So, yeah, I don't think I could afford to start a greenhouse up in January and heat it just to grow Lysianthus. It just like would not, the math would not work.
Sure. Where are you doing all your seed starts? I mean, where were you doing that for the leased land too?
Yeah, so I start them at Westar.
Okay.
So I have a table in their greenhouse, and
That's super nice.
yeah, it's an amazing place. It was owned by George Cohn and his wife Sandy originally, who was um, he was a fighter pilot that then came back to his roots as an organic farmer in his retirement. And then he's passed on the farm to his kids, Brandy and Tanya, who run it now and have really built the nursery business. So they just keep adding greenhouses, and it's scaled up. They deliver to Chicago and Milwaukee and Green Bay now, which has been super cool.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you think you'll start, some sort of germination
yeah,
house here
yeah.
now that you have your own
So
property?
now, yes, because I always like I don't want to take up too much of their space, and so I'm kind of judicious about what I plant, but I'd love to do a lot more here. And so once I can move my greenhouse, once I find a spare week to move my greenhouse from Edgerton and hook it up to the propane, then
Use that as your seed
yes,
germination and
yes, and then build a germ rack in the shed. So I kind of have I did start some this year just under lights, but it is no substitution for a greenhouse.
Sure.
Everything is just stronger and better
Mm-hmm.
with the direct sun.
And are you doing soil blocks or cell trays? What do you use to start the seeds in?
Yeah, we do trays. I mean, part of being in a commercial greenhouse is they're pretty concerned about sanitation and just, they've got a ton of stuff there. So I do have to use just kind of sanitary new trays
Gotcha.
to be in the greenhouse.
Cool.
But here I bleach them and reuse them for my own purposes. But yeah, they just don't want to have any kind of disease outbreak from.
That makes sense. You might ruin your relationship if you brought in.
Yeah, that would, yeah. Everybody in Dane County that needs seed starts would hate me.
I want to jump in a little bit to the practices and kind of the organic, no sprays and kind of soil health. I'm curious how you go about that in terms of amendments or how you kind of treat the soil to make sure your plants get what they need and
Yes.
that practice.
So we grow everything organically. We're not certified. I have kind of mixed feelings. I support the organic certification 1,000,000%. I'm glad it happened. I remember writing my comment to the USDA to help make it happen when I worked for the co-op. So I've kind of seen the evolution of what it was like before, what it was like in the early days, and what it is now. And I've kind of come to the place where I want to direct market everything. I want to know my customers. I want them to know me. And for that, I don't need a government certification. Mm-hmm. I kind of don't need a middleman. I think it does make sense if you are going to ship, if you're going to travel and people don't know who you are, they do need some kind of third party to validate you. But for me, anybody can ask me. They can come to my farmer's market stand, they can email me, and I can tell them exactly what I do. So I kind of feel like that's better in a way.
Or
because
they could just come out here to the farm.
Yeah, they could come see it because, there's a lot of shady stuff that happens under the organic label too. I mean, there's a lot of imports that are questionable origins. We don't know how they were produced. So all that to say, organic, not certified. So we have always used compost and incorporated, big fan of compost, and incorporate that into our beds. This is our first season on this soil, and this soil is very different than the soil we had in Edgerton, which was clay brick, which was really good for tomatoes, right? Because it held that water in. Sure. It was really nice, but this is a lot more sand. I mean, I worked for Teepee and there were sand. I mean, great for growing carrots. That's why they have the best carrots. But I am curious to see how water retention will be. This is our first season on this soil. So I do use everything I use is OMRI and organic approved. Fertilizers, we use cover crops. We rotate our crops all the time, which is challenging when we grow a lot of squash and pumpkins, and it's just like, nothing is as big as this. How do I fit this in the rotation? But I do. So I do the 3-year crop rotation. We also did this cool thing. I wrote a little mini grant with Xerces Society and got this pollinator garden. So I'm going to pick up the plants in June and we're going to do pollinator strips on either end of the vegetable field, which I'm super excited about. Now, at our old place, we kind of did that naturally just because I put the perennials on the edge around because one thing about that farm was it's open to the public because it's in a public place, and so that was a little bit of a challenge too because sometimes I'd go there and there'd be somebody random walking through my space, which on the one hand it's educational, they're learning. I try to put signs up, but then on the other hand I was always like, okay, I need to work. So yeah, so a lot of native plants, a lot of pollinator, really try to support native pollinators and beneficial insect populations. Like that is the best pest control ever. I really don't like using any kind of even organic inputs, right? Because they're toxic to bees. So many things like freaking don't use organic, right? Like try to develop an ecosystem that will help you manage your predators. So that's what we try to do. We do till. I know a lot of people don't. We do.
Each year, you'll retill.
Yeah. I mean, we do have obviously the permanent perennial beds. But so I'm trying something this year, which is I'm like leaving strips of alfalfa because we're planting into an alfalfa field. So this is an experiment to see if this works as like a buffer and maybe a beetle bank to encourage some native beetles and so forth. And maybe we'll just leave some of those strips in. I don't know. We'll see how it works. Maybe it will take over the beds. But yeah, so we usually do like a rye and clover, cover crop, buckwheat.
And then you'll just cut and let it lay and turn it back in.
Yeah.
Cool. What about pest management? I mean, you're kind of relying on the natural ecosystem to manage that.
Yeah. So I'm hoping this is a honeymoon year, and I don't know what pests are here, because this wasn't an active vegetable; it was just alfalfa. So we'll see what pests show up. Probably my worst nemesis is the cucumber beetle, my least favorite creature in the universe.
It likes a lot of flower stuff too. Huh?
Yeah, yellow flowers.
Yep.
Yeah, it was so bad. It really made it hard to grow dahlias. So yeah, it's like a lot of hand squashing, which is what it is. I have used neem. We definitely like yellow sticky cards and sticky traps to scout and monitor and try to stay ahead of them. Yeah, that's really the big one. I mean, potato beetles plucked by hand, Japanese beetles plucked by hand. I did have thrips on my peonies one year, and that was really annoying. And I was just like dunking them in water and like washing them off. That was sad. That was 1 year randomly out of nowhere.
Cool. So I have one more topic, question, or discussion item, and then we'll transition into the rapid fire question last
lightning
section.
Round?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'm just interested, and this works well because you are the administrative side of the farm.
Yeah.
Just the website platform and kind of payment process and the whole design. And are you happy with what you have, and how did that kind of develop or get to where it is?
Yeah. Maybe because I'm a stubborn control freak. I insist on doing things myself, which sometimes I question whether I should. But so yeah, I built the website myself. It's a WordPress site. I use Square as the payment gateway.
And you're happy with Square?
Yeah, mostly works.
Yeah.
I did have one issue earlier this year that actually one of my dear friends and members helped me solve because he is an amazing computer programmer. And it's the payment gateway just stopped. It stopped processing. I don't know if it was like an update or something.
Huh.
I mean, WordPress, you got to update it all the freaking time. But yeah, it just stopped accepting payment. And so what it looked like was it was rejecting people's payments
Oh, okay.
out of the blue, which was super annoying. But then he was just like, oh, the payment gateway. He like logged in and was like, oh, it just turn it back on. And I flipped the switch and then it started working again. I was like, so
Easy fix at least.
that was annoying. But yeah, it was an easy fix.
So otherwise pretty happy with, I mean, do you do social media stuff too?
Yeah, so not as much as I probably should, just because it's a love-hate thing. Um, like I love photography, like Instagram for that purpose. So that's um, probably the only one I really do. Um, yeah, it's Yellow Dog WI, and it's erratic because it's just like I try to take photographs of everything, but even like we were selling tulips at the farmers market, and I was like, okay, gotta get the booths all set up as everything's gonna look beautiful. I'm gonna pile everything up, and people are like coming and buying it, and I'm like, we gotta try to get the okay, fine, no, wait, you gotta buy, and so it's like I never end up with a photo. At the end of the day, it's like empty buckets. I'm like, oh, okay, now I have time to take a photo. So I wish I could do more, and that's my goal. That's like one of my goals for this year is like to take more photography
Mm-hmm.
and share it, because that's the good stuff, and that's like when things get hard, you can look back and be like, yes, that was gorgeous. Okay.
Well, I'm guessing a lot of your members, or at least returning members for sure, are
Yeah.
super curious to see and hear about this transition from your kind of leased setup to the now owning. And your sign went up out front at the end of the driveway,
Yes.
which looks super cool. And
I'm so happy about that. Yeah, it was a local artist in Brooklyn, Rich, from Prairie Art Metal, made that off of the design, which my friend Christina King developed the logo based on like a photograph of my dog, Honey, who comes with us to all of the farmers markets.
nice.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's just what I always wanted, like a place for him to run around and a place to grow flowers, because I just never had enough room. And it was always like veggies, flowers, veggies. Okay, gotta go to the veggies.
Mm-hmm.
Never had enough room for the flowers. So now it's like I can give myself permission to grow all the flowers I want.
Awesome. The last section of the podcast I have titled Rapid Fire Questions. So I have 5 or 6 questions here. You can just give quick hitter answers, or you can explain it a little bit if it warrants a little explanation. So to start off, what has been a heavily relied upon resource for farming knowledge for you?
Other farmers, 100%.
So just your work experience, and if you have questions or something that pops up, you usually just reach out to one of them.
Yeah. I mean, in my early days, the Moses Organic Conference was super helpful. But yeah, other farmers just like, where did you get those thornless blackberries? Oh, okay, cool. Just asking questions of people, and people are usually really awesome to meet people at a farmer's market or message them on Instagram or something.
Yeah.
Share knowledge. That's honestly my best.
That's a great one, for sure. Number 2, your must-have or go-to tool or equipment for farming operation like you have here.
Yeah, our little tiller. I mean, we just have a walk-behind tiller. I want a tractor. John doesn't think we need one. Neither of us are diesel mechanics, which is a fair point, But sometimes I just think, I mean, I drove, George had a John Deere at West Star, and he would let me drive it. We had a water wheel transplanter, and, so nice. You can do so much so quickly. Sometimes here it's just like, everything is slow. Hand scale is very slow.
Mm-hmm. Number 3, Your go-to source for soil or compost or mulch or farm supplies?
Yeah, so I make my soil myself. Compost and mulch I get from Circle B and DeForest, which is, we used to get it from the county when they used to do that. Like the city and county used to run their own compost center, which they stopped doing, which is a whole nother tangent. Makes me mad. But anyway, they basically, all of the municipal landscape goes to Circle B and DeForest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's I worked for a landscape recycling center in another city, and it's like, it makes so much sense. It kills me that Madison stopped doing it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like you pick up all the leaves. They've been trying to run a composting, municipal compost program, and they haven't quite figured it out. It would make so much sense, but anyway, Circle B.
Circle B out of DeForest.
Yeah.
Cool. Number 4, your favorite flower and or vegetable
Oh God,
on the farm.
that's like the favorite kid question. Come on.
You can give 2.
I mean, vegetable, I gotta say tomatoes,
Okay.
because I just love them so much, and there's just so much difference between local tomatoes and everything else.
Amen.
And
Good one.
I will never stop growing new varieties. It's like, I don't know, the people that just grow the same varieties every year, how do you do it? I cannot do it. I have to grow new ones just because I want to grow everyone under the sun. Favorite flower? What's my favorite flower? Snapdragons.
Ooh.
Snapdragons.
Do you succession plant those too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, seeding them is a pain in the butt,
Yeah.
because they're just like tiny, tiny little poppy seeds, and they do take a long time to grow, but they're so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also tough. They're like beautiful but tough, which I love, because they'll grow like into frost. They're super cold hardy, and um, yeah, there's just nothing like them.
All right, snapdragons. Good one. Number 5 is which cut flower you grow that you would say has the longest vase life or kind of holds up the longest? It's like a hardy one in a vase.
Yeah. I mean, people do tell me that their flowers will last more than a week.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes to my detriment, they come back and they're like, "Oh, I still have mine from last week." And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
I don't buy
Shoot.
another one.
The longest. I mean, Lysianthus do last a while. Particularly if you manage your flowers right. I mean, like, you keep cutting the stems, you keep changing the water, you keep them cool, keep them out of sunlight. That's probably the biggest thing you can do.
All right, last one. The most challenging or difficult part for farming, especially while you're working full time.
Yeah. Oh, so many ways to answer that one. Not having enough time, sure. Cucumber beetles, I still hate them. They're my nemesis. I even asked the French Canadian guy.
Jean-Martin
Yes.
Fortier.
Yes. I asked him one time, and he was like, "Oh, you just flame them, like when they're in the flower, like you just go with your flame torch and you just get them all." And I was like, maybe that works for squash. I don't think that works for flowers. They're still my biggest nemesis. I'm hoping they're not here. But
That would be awesome.
yeah, that would be.
And then the opposite end would be the most rewarding.
I love that it's very concrete and tangible. So you see the fruits of your labor. The work you put in is what you get out. Just very satisfying. Eating really well, having beautiful, surrounding yourself with beauty. I mean, that's the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's the good life. Being able to design everything myself and like figure out problems and just create things. I don't know, running a business is creative. Like, you have to be kind of scrappy. You have to kind of constantly figure out when things go wrong or they don't go the way you thought, or there's a global pandemic and you have to figure out what to do. I don't know, it's challenging in a good way most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Working with nature, learning to respect all of the intricate ecosystems and natural systems. I mean, that's intensely rewarding. It's intensely rewarding when you get it right and you're like, Yeah.
It's working.
I do know something.
Cool. Well, thanks again for your time, and for sharing all of those things and kind of your journey, and what you have here is pretty special and awesome. Hopefully we can definitely connect again soon. Any final thoughts or parting words?
Well, I would just say, sometimes people ask me, does growing flowers organically matter, right? Like, you don't need them. Although some of them you do, right? Like, I love nasturtiums and violets and like put them on cakes and cupcakes and cheese
Mhm.
boards and everything. So a lot of them you can, but it's the same soil. It's the same ecosystem. It's the same, problems that come with conventional agricultural monoculture. I mean, it's the same thing for flowers,
Mhm.
right? Like, all of the chemicals that get poured on the soil, they don't go away. And that's the same for flowers. So it does matter. It does matter. I mean, you're bringing those chemicals into your house, maybe your pets are eating them and they're toxic for the workers.
Right.
So it really does matter. And being able to know your farmer, I mean, I feel like in South Central Wisconsin, we are just blessed by an abundance of cool local farmers, people who are devoted their lives to making good food and flowers and beauty available for people. And so, yeah, I feel pretty special. Feel pretty lucky to be here.
For sure. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed this episode and got a few takeaways from it. Let us know if there's a small-scale farm operation you know of that could be a good fit for our podcast. Thanks for being part of our journey. Till next time, peace out.